You don't notice it at first. It's hidden in the routine, the alarm, the commute, the polite smile that feels more like a mask. On paper, you've done everything right. Steady job, predictable paycheck, all the rules your parents swore would lead to freedom. But somewhere between the quiet of the night and the noise of the morning, it hits you. That sharp, restless emptiness, that whisper you've tried to ignore. Why am I still trapped when I did everything they told me to do? Here's the truth, uncomfortable, but necessary. You haven't failed. You've been playing by rules written to keep you in place. Work harder, pay more, chase security in a world where money is printed like confetti, while the value of what you've saved dissolves a little more every single day. I am Solomon, and 3,000 years ago I discovered what separates those who build empires from those who serve them. It was never about intelligence. It was never about luck. It was about one thing: mindset. The rich don't think like you've been taught to think. They don't fear debt, they use it. They don't pay taxes, they understand them. They don't seek security, they create it. Tonight, you have a choice. You can close this video, go back to your comfortable cage, and keep pretending that working harder at a job will somehow set you free. Or you can let me show you what 99% of people will never understand: the invisible rules that govern money. The three mindsets that exist within every human being, and why society has programmed you to live in the weakest one. This isn't another get-rich-quick scheme. This is about becoming someone completely different. Someone who sees opportunity where others see crisis. Someone who builds wealth while others complain about the economy. Someone who understands that your internal economy is the only economy that truly matters. The old world is dying. The rules you learned are obsolete. But for those brave enough to think differently, this chaos is the greatest opportunity in human history. If you're ready to stop being a victim of the system and start using it to build the life you actually want, then subscribe now. Because what I'm about to reveal will change not just how you think about money, but who you become in this world. Number 1. The obsession with the traditional path. You followed every rule they gave you. You believed in the sacred formula. Study hard, get good grades, find a secure job, work diligently, save money, stay out of debt, invest for the long term. You did it all. And yet, here you are, decades later, watching your purchasing power dissolve like sugar in rain, wondering why the promised land of financial freedom feels further away than ever. This is the great deception of our time. The traditional path to wealth has become a highway to mediocrity, and those who cling to it are like passengers on a sinking ship, still believing the captain when he says everything is fine. But I, Solomon, who accumulated wealth beyond measure 3 millennia ago, tell you this: the rules of the game have changed so drastically that following the old playbook is not just ineffective, it is financial suicide. Picture a man building his house with blueprints from 100 years ago, ignoring that the foundation has shifted, the materials have evolved, and the very climate has transformed. This is what you do when you follow advice designed for a world that no longer exists. The financial landscape your grandparents navigated was built on gold standards and government restraint. Today's world operates on printed money and systematic devaluation. Let me paint you a picture of what is happening while you sleep. In the time it takes you to read this sentence, governments around the world have created millions of dollars out of thin air. Not backed by gold, not supported by productivity, but conjured from digital keystrokes. Every dollar they print is a tax on every dollar you save. Your savings account, which you consider safe, is being systematically robbed by inflation at a rate faster than your interest can compensate. I once knew a man who followed the traditional path with religious devotion. He worked for 40 years at the same company, contributed faithfully to his retirement plan, lived below his means, and saved every spare dollar. He retired at 65, proud of his discipline. Within 10 years, inflation had reduced his purchasing power by 40%. The groceries that once cost him $50 now cost $70. The vacation he had planned became unaffordable. He had done everything right according to the old rules, and the new reality had made him poor. The turning point comes when you realize that what you were taught was not wrong for its time, but catastrophically outdated for ours. Schools still teach you to seek employment because they were designed during the industrial age, when large companies offered lifetime security, but lifetime employment died with the pension system. Companies now exist to serve shareholders, not employees. Your loyalty means nothing when quarterly profits are threatened. The practical wisdom here is brutal but necessary. Stop thinking like a saver and start thinking like an investor. Stop seeking security and start creating it. The money you save in the bank loses value every day. The debt you fear could be the leverage that builds your empire. The job security you crave is an illusion that keeps you trapped in someone else's vision of your life. The old path promises you a comfortable cage. The new reality demands that you become the architect of your own freedom. Number 2. The 3 internal characters. Inside your mind right now, 3 distinct voices are having a conversation about your financial future. Listen carefully, because most people live their entire lives without realizing these voices exist, let alone understanding which one is controlling their decisions. Today, you will meet the poor person, the middle-class person, and the rich person, who all live within you. The poor person inside you speaks the language of fear. This voice whispers that money is scarce, that taking risks is dangerous, that you should be grateful for whatever you have. It tells you that wealthy people are greedy, that you do not deserve abundance, that safety lies in staying small. This voice was born from scarcity, nurtured by limitations, and it will keep you trapped in survival mode forever if you let it dominate your thinking. The middle-class person inside you speaks the language of security. This voice is more sophisticated than the poor voice, but equally limiting. It tells you to seek predictable income, reliable benefits, steady advancement up someone else's ladder. It values the paycheck above passion, security above opportunity, and conformity above creativity. This voice will give you comfort, but it will never give you freedom. The rich person inside you speaks the language of possibility. This voice sees abundance everywhere, views problems as opportunities, and understands that true security comes not from depending on others, but from developing your own capabilities. It knows that the greatest risk is not taking risks, that the most dangerous path is the safe path, and that freedom is not something you find but something you create. Imagine 3 people standing at the edge of a cliff, looking across a chasm to where their dreams await. The poor person sees only the fall and walks away. The middle-class person asks if there is a bridge built by someone else, with safety rails and insurance coverage. The rich person starts building their own bridge. Here is what most people never understand. You were not born with just one of these voices. You came into this world with the capacity for all 3. But from the moment you entered school, society began a systematic campaign to strengthen the middle-class voice while silencing the rich one. They taught you to raise your hand, wait your turn, follow instructions, and never question authority. They rewarded compliance and punished innovation. They made you afraid of failure and comfortable with dependence. The moment of awakening comes when you realize that the voice you have been listening to is not your true voice, but the voice of a system designed to create obedient workers, not independent thinkers. The middle-class mindset that feels so reasonable, so responsible, is actually a sophisticated form of self-imprisonment. It gives you just enough comfort to keep you from pursuing real freedom. The practical breakthrough is this: start noticing which voice is speaking when you make financial decisions. When you see an investment opportunity, which voice responds first? When you consider starting a business, which voice dominates? When you think about asking for a raise or changing careers, which voice takes control? Awareness is the first step to transformation. You cannot eliminate the poor and middle-class voices entirely, nor should you. They serve important functions, but you must learn to recognize when the rich voice is speaking and give it permission to lead. This voice has been waiting your entire life for you to listen. It holds the keys to the kingdom you have been seeking. Number 3. The entrepreneurial mindset. The word entrepreneur has been corrupted by motivational speakers and business schools until it has lost all meaning. They have made it about starting companies, writing business plans, and raising capital. But I tell you that entrepreneurship is not something you do, it is something you are. It is a way of seeing the world that transforms everything you touch. You think entrepreneurship is about business, but it is actually about character. It is about becoming the kind of person who creates value where others see only problems, who builds bridges where others see only chasms, who plants seeds while others complain about the drought. The entrepreneurial mindset is not learned in classrooms or boardrooms. It is forged in the fire of necessity, shaped by the hammer of failure, and polished by the persistence to continue when everyone else has quit. Picture a tree that grows in rocky soil, with little water and harsh winds. The tree that survives does not complain about conditions. It does not wait for better weather or richer soil. It adapts. It grows deeper roots. It becomes stronger precisely because of the challenges it faces. This is the entrepreneurial spirit. It thrives not despite adversity, but because of it. I remember the day I received my last paycheck. It was not just money changing hands. It was the death of one identity and the birth of another. The employee in me died that day, along with his need for approval, his desire for security, and his fear of failure. What emerged was something rawer, more powerful, and infinitely more dangerous to the status quo. I made a decision that day that would define everything that followed. I would rather fail as an entrepreneur than succeed as an employee. Most people misunderstand what failure means to an entrepreneur. They think we fear it, avoid it, or see it as the opposite of success. But failure is not the enemy of the entrepreneur. It is the teacher, the sculptor, the forge that shapes character. Every failed venture teaches lessons that success never could. Every lost dollar reveals weaknesses that profit would hide. Every closed door forces you to build new muscles, develop new skills, create new solutions. The turning point comes when you realize that the absence of a guaranteed paycheck is not a curse, but a blessing. Without the safety net of employment, you are forced to develop capabilities you never knew you possessed. Hunger becomes creativity. Uncertainty becomes opportunity. Fear becomes fuel. The entrepreneur learns to dance with chaos while others hide from it. Here is what separates the true entrepreneur from the merely self-employed. The entrepreneur builds systems. The self-employed becomes the system. The entrepreneur creates value that works without their constant presence. The self-employed creates a job that owns them more completely than any boss ever could. The entrepreneur thinks in terms of scalability and leverage. The self-employed thinks in terms of hours and effort. The practical wisdom is this: stop waiting for perfect conditions to begin. Stop looking for guarantees before you act. Stop seeking permission from authorities who have never walked the path you want to walk. The entrepreneurial journey begins not when you have all the answers, but when you become comfortable with the questions. It starts not when you eliminate risk, but when you learn to manage it. You already have everything you need to begin. You have problems around you that need solving. You have skills that others need. You have a mind capable of creating value from nothing but ideas and determination. What you lack is not capability, but permission. And the only person who can give you that permission is staring back at you in the mirror. Number 4, money, debt, and taxes. You have been taught to fear debt like a deadly disease, to avoid it at all costs, to celebrate the day you become debt-free as if it were your liberation day. But what if everything you were taught about debt was not just wrong, but deliberately designed to keep you poor? What if the very thing you fear most is actually the tool that could set you free? This is where the comfortable lies of conventional wisdom collide with the uncomfortable truths of wealth creation. While you have been programmed to see debt as bondage, the wealthy have learned to see it as leverage. While you celebrate paying off your mortgage, they are refinancing theirs to buy 3 more properties. While you save pennies in accounts that barely beat inflation, they are borrowing millions at rates lower than the returns on their investments. Let me share with you a transaction that perfectly illustrates this principle. Recently, I refinanced $300 million in debt. Not to pay it off, but to reduce the interest rate and increase my cash flow by $800,000 per month. That money, which would have gone to the bank, now flows into my pocket every month for the rest of the loan term. This is not recklessness. This is financial intelligence. But here is what your financial advisor will never tell you. The tax code is written by the rich, for the rich. It is designed to reward those who create jobs, build businesses, and invest in assets. The biggest tax breaks go not to the highest earners, but to the smartest players. When I make $1 million in profit, I immediately invest it in real estate. The bank then lends me $4 million against that asset. I now control $5 million worth of property, while the government gives me tax deductions for depreciation, interest, and expenses. Meanwhile, the doctor who earns $1 million working in his practice pays $700,000 in taxes and fees. He worked harder than I did, helped more people than I did, and required more education than I did. But he played by the employee rules in an owner's game. He traded his time for money, while I traded my knowledge for leverage. Picture two men climbing a mountain. One carries everything he needs on his back, making each step more difficult than the last. The other learns to use the mountain's own features, the existing paths, and the natural leverage points to reach the summit with less effort. The first man works harder, but the second man works smarter. Debt and taxes are the mountain's features that you can either fight against or learn to use. The revelation that changes everything is this: money is not scarce, but financial education is. The wealthy do not have access to different money than you do. They have access to different knowledge. They understand that in a world of infinite money printing, holding cash is financial suicide. They know that the inflation which destroys your savings actually helps pay off their debt with cheaper dollars. They realize that the tax code rewards investment more than income, leverage more than savings, and assets more than cash. Here is the practical application that can transform your financial life. Stop thinking like someone who earns money and start thinking like someone who deploys money. Every dollar you earn should immediately be assigned a job: buying assets that appreciate, generating income that flows, or creating tax advantages that protect. When you make money, your first question should not be how to save it, but how to leverage it into more money. The path to wealth is not paved with sacrifices and savings, but with intelligence and leverage. Those who understand this principle will thrive in the new economy. Those who cling to the old rules will find themselves working harder for less, saving money that buys less each year, and building a retirement that cannot sustain the life they hope to live. Number 5. School knowledge and obsolescence. You spent the best years of your life in an institution designed to create factory workers for an industrial age that no longer exists. You memorized facts that became obsolete before you graduated, learned skills that machines now perform better than humans, and developed thought patterns that actually prevent you from adapting to the modern world. And the cruelest joke of all is that you were taught to consider this education a badge of honor. The educational system you trusted to prepare you for life was actually preparing you for a life that disappeared decades ago. It was built on the assumption that if you learned the right information and followed the right steps, you would be rewarded with job security and steady advancement. But that world vanished with the lifetime pension, the company loyalty, and the predictable career ladder. Here is the truth that no educator wants you to understand. By the time you finished your 4-year degree, most of what you learned in your first year was already outdated. Knowledge now doubles every 18 months. The rate of change is accelerating so rapidly that the skills you master today will be performed by artificial intelligence tomorrow. Your expensive education equipped you for a world that existed when your curriculum was written, not the world you actually inhabit. Consider the tragedy of a brilliant mind trained to memorize instead of think, to follow instead of lead, to seek approval instead of create value. You learn to raise your hand before speaking, to wait for permission before acting, and to believe that someone else's approval determines your worth. These habits, reinforced for decades, create adults who cannot function without external validation, steady paychecks, and detailed instructions. I once met a man with 3 advanced degrees who could not start a simple business because he was paralyzed by the lack of a syllabus. He knew everything about economic theory but nothing about economic reality. He could recite formulas but could not recognize opportunities. His education had made him an expert on the past but helpless in the present. This is what happens when information is confused with intelligence, when credentials are mistaken for capability. The paradigm shift occurs when you realize that the most valuable knowledge cannot be taught in schools because it changes too rapidly. The skills that matter most, entrepreneurship, emotional intelligence, financial literacy, adaptability, are not subjects you can master through textbooks. They are capabilities you develop through experience, failure, and continuous learning in the real world. But here is what I want you to understand clearly. I am not attacking education itself, but the illusion that formal education alone is sufficient. Learning is essential, but school learning is incomplete. The knowledge you need to thrive cannot be contained within a curriculum because it is being written in real time by those who are creating the future, not studying it. The practical transformation begins when you shift from being a student of the past to being a student of the present. Instead of asking what degree you should pursue, ask what problems you should solve. Instead of seeking credentials that impress others, develop capabilities that create value. Instead of learning what everyone else knows, learn what everyone else needs. Your real education begins the day you realize that school is over, but learning never ends. The most successful people in the world are not those with the most degrees, but those with the most relevant knowledge. And relevance cannot be taught. It can only be discovered by those brave enough to engage directly with the world as it is, not as it was when the textbooks were written. Number 6. Internal as external economy. There are 2 economies that determine your financial fate, and most people spend their entire lives focused on the wrong one. The external economy is what you see on the news: stock market fluctuations, unemployment rates, government policies, global crises. The internal economy is what happens inside your mind, your beliefs about money, your reactions to setbacks, your ability to see opportunity where others see only problems. You wake up each morning and immediately tune into the external economy. You check the stock market, read the headlines, absorb the fears and anxieties of a world that profits from your attention. You let external circumstances dictate your internal state, giving away your power to forces you cannot control, while ignoring the one force you can completely command: your own thoughts and responses. This misplaced focus is the reason why 2 people can experience identical economic conditions and achieve completely different outcomes. One sees recession and panics, the other sees recession and recognizes opportunity. One reads about inflation and hoards cash, the other understands that inflation makes debt cheaper and assets more valuable. The external conditions are the same, but the internal response creates entirely different realities. Imagine 2 trees in the same forest, facing the same storm. One tree has deep roots and flexible branches. It bends with the wind and emerges stronger. The other tree has shallow roots and brittle branches. It breaks at the first strong gust. The difference is not in the storm they face, but in the internal structure they have built to handle whatever comes. I learned this lesson during what others called the worst financial crisis of their lifetime. While people around me were losing jobs, losing homes, and losing hope, I was buying assets at the lowest prices I had ever seen. The external economy was in chaos, but my internal economy was stronger than ever. I had trained my mind to see opportunity in crisis, to remain calm in chaos, and to act decisively when others were paralyzed by fear. The breakthrough comes when you realize that your external results are always a reflection of your internal economy. If your thoughts are dominated by scarcity, your bank account will reflect scarcity. If your mind is occupied with fear, your life will be shaped by the very things you fear. If your internal dialogue focuses on what you cannot control, you will feel powerless in every situation. But when you master your internal economy, when you learn to control your thoughts and responses regardless of external circumstances, you become what I call anti-fragile. You do not just survive difficult times. You use them to become stronger. You do not just adapt to change. You profit from the chaos that destroys others. The practical discipline that creates this transformation is simple but not easy. Take complete responsibility for your internal state, regardless of external conditions. When the market crashes, focus not on what you lost, but on what you can learn. When opportunity disappears, look not for someone to blame, but for new possibilities to create. When others panic, use their fear as a buying signal. Your internal economy operates by different rules than the external economy. It responds not to market forces, but to mental discipline. It is not subject to government policies, but to personal principles. It cannot be taxed, regulated, or controlled by anyone other than you. And once you learn to manage it properly, it becomes the source of wealth that no external force can ever take away. The richest people in history were not those who lived in the best economic times, but those who maintained the strongest internal economy, regardless of external circumstances. Your true net worth is not measured in dollars, but in your ability to create dollars regardless of what the world throws at you. Number 7. The great entrepreneurship illusion. You see them everywhere. People who call themselves entrepreneurs while living lives that are more restricted than any employee ever experienced. They traded a boss for a business, but the business became a more demanding master than any manager could ever be. They sought freedom and found a prison with themselves as both warden and inmate. This is the great entrepreneurship illusion that seduces millions into a trap more subtle and more complete than traditional employment. They believe that owning a business automatically makes them entrepreneurs, but what they have actually created is the world's most expensive job. They work longer hours than their former colleagues, bear more stress than their former managers, and often make less money than they would have earned climbing the corporate ladder they abandoned. The distinction I want you to understand is not between employed and self-employed, but between those who have built systems and those who have become systems. The true entrepreneur creates processes that generate value independent of their constant presence. The self-employed person becomes the irreplaceable component that makes everything work, and therefore the point of failure that can destroy everything overnight. Consider the difference between a restaurant owner who must be present for every meal service and a restaurant owner who has created systems so effective that the business runs profitably whether he is there or not. Both own businesses, both call themselves entrepreneurs, but only one has achieved true entrepreneurial freedom. The first has bought himself a job, the second has built himself an asset. I once knew a man who left a comfortable corporate position to become a consultant. He was proud of his independence, his flexibility, and his escape from corporate bureaucracy. 10 years later, he was working 80 hours per week, could never take a vacation, and lived in constant fear that his largest client would leave. He had all the stress of ownership with none of the benefits of leverage. He had confused being self-employed with being entrepreneurial. The awakening comes when you realize that entrepreneurship is not about working for yourself, but about building something that works without you. It is not about being your own boss, but about creating systems that eliminate the need for a boss. It is not about having control over your time, but about generating value that compounds regardless of how you spend your time. The practical distinction that changes everything is this: employees sell their time, the self-employed sell their expertise, but entrepreneurs sell systems that create value. The employee is limited by hours in a day. The self-employed is limited by their personal capacity, but the entrepreneur is limited only by the effectiveness of the systems they create and the size of the problems they choose to solve. Most people who think they want to be entrepreneurs actually want to be well-paid freelancers. They want the prestige of business ownership without the responsibility of building something larger than themselves. They want the freedom that comes from entrepreneurship without the discipline required to achieve it. They want the results of systematic thinking without the effort of systematic building. True entrepreneurship requires you to think beyond your own capabilities. to build processes that work better than you could work alone, and to create value that scales beyond your personal limitations. It demands that you evolve from being someone who does the work to someone who designs the work, from someone who creates value to someone who creates systems that create value. The question that reveals whether you are truly thinking like an entrepreneur or just playing entrepreneurial dress-up is this: if you disappeared tomorrow, would your business generate the same value? Or would it collapse? Your answer will tell you whether you have built a business or simply bought yourself a more complicated job. Number 8. The difference between rich, poor, and middle class. The difference between rich, poor, and middle class has nothing to do with the numbers in your bank account and everything to do with the thoughts in your mind. You can be financially poor but mentally rich, destined for wealth. You can be financially middle class but mentally poor, destined for struggle. And you can be financially wealthy but mentally middle class, destined to lose it all. The external condition is temporary. The internal condition is destiny. When crisis strikes, each mindset reveals its true nature. The poor mindset sees crisis as confirmation that the world is hostile, that success is impossible, and that their struggles are someone else's fault. They become victims of circumstances, powerless to change their situation, dependent on others to rescue them from conditions they feel incapable of escaping. The middle-class mindset sees crisis as a temporary interruption of normal life. They believe that if they can just weather the storm, hold on to their jobs, and wait for things to return to normal, they will be safe. They see crisis as something to survive rather than something to leverage. They focus on protection rather than opportunity, on defensive moves rather than offensive strategies. But the rich mindset sees crisis as the greatest opportunity they will encounter in their lifetime. They understand that wealth is always transferred during times of chaos, from those who panic to those who remain calm, from those who sell to those who buy, from those who retreat to those who advance. They see crisis not as a threat to their security, but as an accelerant for their wealth building. Picture 3 people walking through a forest when they encounter a fallen tree blocking their path. The person with a poor mindset sits down and complains about their bad luck, waiting for someone else to clear the path. The person with a middle-class mindset looks for an official trail that someone else has already cleared, even if it takes them far from their destination. The person with a rich mindset sees an opportunity to create a new path and often discovers a better route than the original one. The fundamental difference lies not in their circumstances, but in their relationship with control. Poor thinking assumes that external forces control outcomes, that success and failure are random, and that individual effort makes little difference in the face of larger economic forces. This mindset creates learned helplessness, where people stop trying because they believe trying does not matter. Middle-class thinking assumes that if you follow the right rules, work within the established systems, and avoid taking risks, you will be rewarded with security and steady progress. This mindset creates dependency on institutions, employers, and government programs. It trades potential freedom for perceived security. Rich thinking assumes that individuals create their own outcomes, regardless of external conditions. It sees obstacles as problems to solve rather than excuses for failure. It understands that control is internal, that wealth is created by mindset and behavior, and that external conditions are simply the environment in which internal strength is either demonstrated or revealed to be lacking. The transformation from one mindset to another does not happen through changing your bank balance, but through changing your fundamental beliefs about how the world works. When you truly understand that your outcomes are determined by your responses rather than your circumstances, you stop being a victim of the economy and start being a creator of your own economic reality. This shift in thinking changes everything. Instead of reading the news to see what is happening to you, you read it to see what opportunities others are missing. Instead of hoping for better times, you create better results regardless of the times. Instead of being afraid of change, you become the change that creates the future others will have to adapt to. The question that determines which mindset will dominate your life is this: when everything goes wrong, do you look outside for someone to blame, or inside for something to change? Your answer to that question will determine not just your bank account, but the entire trajectory of your life. The moment you truly understand these principles, you cross an invisible threshold that separates two different worlds. Behind you lies the realm of conventional thinking, where millions of people chase the same outdated formulas, believing that safety exists in following the crowd. Ahead of you stretches a landscape that most will never see, where the rules are different, where leverage replaces labor, and where your mind becomes your greatest asset. This transformation is not like learning a new skill or memorizing information. It is like developing new eyes that see opportunities where others see obstacles, new ears that hear possibility in the midst of chaos, and a new heart that beats with the rhythm of creation rather than consumption. You begin to notice patterns that were always there but invisible to your previous way of thinking. Picture a caterpillar that has spent its entire existence crawling along the ground, believing that this horizontal world is all there is. Then comes the moment of metamorphosis, and suddenly it discovers the vertical dimension of flight. The sky was always there, the ability was always within, but the transformation had to occur before the possibility could be realized. Right now, as you absorb these truths, that same metamorphosis is beginning within you. The employee mindset that once felt like your identity is dissolving. The fears that once paralyzed your financial decisions are losing their power. The limiting beliefs that once defined your possibilities are being replaced by an understanding of how wealth truly operates in the modern world. Every person who has made this transition remembers the moment when everything clicked, when the invisible became visible, when the complex became simple, when what seemed impossible suddenly felt inevitable. You are approaching that moment now. If you are ready to continue this journey of financial awakening, to keep discovering the hidden mechanisms that govern wealth and freedom, then join this community of transformation. Subscribe not to another channel, but to a new way of seeing the world. You are no longer the same person who began watching this, and this is only the beginning of what you can become.